annual conference. This is actually the first live event since 2020. So attendance is going to be a little bit hard to foresee. But welcome to attend our afternoon session.
It's 3 p.m. We're going to change to a special format. Next coming up is a fireside chat with 2 members. The first guest speaker is Mr. Mir Imran, and we have our interviewer, Christie Wang. So this will be a panel discussion. Please come to stage. I will introduce both of you. Mr. Mir Imran, he has over 40 years experience in medical technology field. He has set up more than 20 companies and 15 liquidity and exit events. In last year, July, Rani Therapeutics went public in Nasdaq. Mr. Imran holding more than 800 patents. And he was rated as a top 50 medical development device inventors of all time. And we have our interviewer, Christie Wang. She's our afternoon technical program co-organizer and moderator for this session. She is a current member of board of Chinese Institute of Engineers, San Francisco Bay Area. She is a founding partner of Valerie Capital, and she's the president of Visiting Robotics. She's also a mentor of Stanford University Technology Innovation. Let's welcome both of them. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And thank you, Mir, for being here.
Pleasure. Thank you.
It's our great pleasure. So I know that we only have less than 1 hour, right? So I would probably start with something that is unknown to the public. I know that you have both an engineering and medical background, but I also know that you hate medical school. Can you give us a little bit background on that?
Yeah. How many engineers are here? Oh, so how many of you would like to go to medical school? Not many. I don't see any hands going up. I was an engineer, undergrad EE, and mechanical engineering, biomedical engineering, grad school. I had no desire to be attending medical school, and I got suckered into it by a professor of mine. And he was just an amazing guy. And he pushed me. He said, you got to go to the medical school. You'll understand the problems better. And you know, reluctantly I did that. Many times I wanted to drop out. And but that exposure really prepared me to solve the many issues that still exist. At least some of them I was able to tackle.
That's wonderful. And then you also mentioned that, you know, you hated medical school, but actually medical school prepared you for the later, all the entrepreneurial, you know, endeavors. So tell us a little bit about the 40 years that you solved how many problems. And I heard that you've established approximately maybe 28 companies. And
yeah, lost count of those.
A lot of them, right? And I know maybe a couple shut down, but 13 or 15 got acquired. Mm-hmm. And now Ronny Therapeutics is the number 4th that went public. And I think you still have a few remaining private. Yeah. So that's kind of the situation. I think it's difficult for even one company to be successful. And within 40 years, let's say that if you established 28 companies, so it seems that you've only spent 1.5 years on each one of them. How did you really manage to do that?
No, you see, each company to take it to successful outcome can take 7 to 10 years. So this is each one is a long journey. And, but my journey started much earlier than, while I was in college, in fact. My first company I started, it was in 1975. And a friend of mine had a robbery in their house. And he was looking to get an alarm system installed. In those days, most alarm systems used relay logic. And those of you who understand logic, you know, the old relay logic. And microprocessors were just being introduced. There was a little company out here called Intel that had a 4-bit microcontroller with a very limited instruction set. So I decided to use that and develop a alarm system and formed a company. All this while I was going to school full-time. And, you know, it was a great experience. I had no money, so I financed it with a couple of credit cards, and realized that, you know, making payments for many, many months afterwards was not fun. So first 2 companies I did while I was in college were failures. And so but I learned quite a bit. And instead of losing heart and stopping there, I went on.
And that actually led to success, many successes in the...
Yeah. You know, I've had many failures too, and in fact, I often give talks at various universities, and one of the talks I give is on my failures, analyzing and dissecting failures and what I learned from them. And so I always enjoy talking about my failures.
So can you talk a little bit about your failures today for our audience? I think everyone is intrigued.
No, look, it's so today the problems I solve are really driven by process. The problems I pick are driven by process. The solutions that I pick are driven by process. Before that, you know, for instance, in the early 90s, I had a company. There was a technology that became available called nickel titanium alloy, shape memory alloys, and I showed a cardiologist friend what could be done with it, you know, how you could steer a tiny wire that could go into a blood vessel, as an example. He got so excited, he said, Mir, you have to build a company around this and I'll invest. And he was super excited. He was also nationally known cardiologist, so I said, my God, you know, such a amazing guy, he's so excited. And he called some of his friends, and before I knew it, I had a company that was funded and went to work on it, got the product, a steerable guide wire, a 14,000, you know, a third of a millimeter diameter steerable wire. And we got FDA approval. We took it to other cardiologists, and they were equally amazed, but they said, why did you do it? We don't need it. And, you know, you get a sinking feeling, you know, after going through several years. And that was a huge failure on my part for not doing sufficient market research, not talking to enough customers, and we all know how important that is. Talking to one really well-known customer is not sufficient. You can't build a company around that. So that was an embarrassment. But, you know, the company was ultimately successful because I quickly pivoted towards other products.
I see. Well, very good, very good. So how do you define success then?
You know, the distance between success and failure is very small. You know, every success has a whole bunch of failures that are not even, you don't talk about. You fail so many times and you get up and continue, and then the final result might be successful. And many failures, the one I described, was a successful, technologically successful product. The product did what was intended. So successful or failures may have a number of successes along the way. So, and you know, one of the things that keeps me going is that I don't get too excited with success, and I
Not
don't
anymore.
No, never. I actually, you know, it's a happy occasion, but I don't spend even a minute on it. I move on to because there are 5 other things I'm doing that I'm worrying about. And failures don't devastate me either. So, part of the reason is I'm detached from the outcome. I don't care what the outcome is. I do try to do the best, and if it turns out to be successful, it's great. And that's what Buddha taught us, right? Stay detached from material things. And so money is not what I focus on. It's a byproduct of my work.
Yeah, I remember you told me this before. You said you have to detach yourself from the result. Doesn't matter whether it's successful or it's a failure. Because once you detach yourself, and then the decision you make will be very pure and focused.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what you told me.
That's true. And the decisions are colored by, you know, if you're doing the right things, if you are trying to achieve the right result, and you're not driven by fear or greed, those are the 2 most powerful forces that drive our society, fear and greed. Look at the stock market. When it goes up, it keeps going up. You know, that's greed. And then when somebody starts selling, Elon Musk starts selling something and it starts crashing, right? So if you can get fear and greed out of your life, you can have a much more peaceful life and enjoy it, rather than have constant ups and downs.
I'm sure that you're enjoying your life every day because you have so many things on your mind.
Yeah.
Okay, so you know, just now I think Yan Shu mentioned that your 4th public company, which is Rani Therapeutics. Last time you told me that Ronny Therapeutics is the hardest thing that you have ever done. So maybe let's use this as one case study. Tell us a little bit about how hard it is and what is the hardest part that you came across and how did you solve it?
Yeah, so you're all familiar with drugs like insulin that have to be injected. There are probably about 100 additional drugs that are made of proteins, biologics, that also have to be injected. Either by the patient or they have to go to a clinic to get IV injections, because these drugs cannot be taken orally. Biologic drugs are basically made out of proteins, and proteins are digested by the intestines, by the gut. In fact, our gut is designed, the chemistry of the gut is designed to break down proteins into little bits. So if you took insulin by mouth, it'll get destroyed. It won't get absorbed as insulin. So a lot of scientists over the last 50 years have been trying to convert a couple of drugs, insulin is one of them, into an oral pill. And because of the destruction of the drug molecules, absorption is, when it happens, and it's rare, absorption is less than 1%, fraction of a percent, which is not practical, compared to the injection, sub-Q injection, which is painful. So, this is, again, speaks to one of the other things is how do you pick problems? So I'm always hunting for problems that are big problems that impact a lot of people and that are poorly understood, poorly solved. And so a dozen years ago, I had having lunch with a pharmaceutical executive who told me he had come to visit Bay Area. I had lunch with him, and I said, "What brings you here?" And so he said that I was here. We had invested in a company that closed down because the product didn't work. And I said, "Well, what were they doing?" And he said, "Well, they were trying to convert this small protein drug into an oral formulation, and they just couldn't get any absorption." And that was the first time I even thought about it. I knew that proteins couldn't be taken orally, but I didn't realize that people have been struggling for 50 years to try and get these things absorbed. So my engineering background, EE, ME, material science, all that came in handy, and the medical background, because I knew that intestines don't have the pain sensors that your skin does. If you poke a needle in your skin, it hurts. If you poke it in your intestines all day long, you won't feel a thing. I knew that. So I said, why can't we create a tiny robot, a pill, that goes past the stomach into the intestine, and once there, it transforms itself into an injection and delivers an injection in the intestinal wall, which is pain-free, and then disintegrates and the remnants pass out. It's easier said than done, right? So
how many years did it take you to get there?
It took 2 or 3 years to come up with a way of doing it, but then implementing that into practice where took a long time because the GI tract was not well understood. Even the experts didn't know what some of the features of the GI tract. So we had to get access to human intestines and dissect them and measure them and understand that, and that helped us or allowed us to design essentially it's an autonomous thing. It's like landing on Mars, because once you swallow it, you have absolutely no control. And so it's all driven, it's a robot which is purely driven by material science and physiology and anatomy. And there are no electronics in it. And and the cost of goods is minuscule. It's a piece of plastic. The needle is made out of sugar, or a type of sugar, and the mechanism is so simple. You all can go, if you want to see how it works, on the website, Rani Therapeutics .com, and you'll see a video on how it works. So it was, if you're making something, an engineering solution to a problem, you put it in a box, or like even a pacemaker goes into a little container that's implanted. But this device actually interacts with the anatomy, and so you had to know the anatomy and really understand it. And we were able to, it took us many years to get human samples from organ donors, and that led to the understanding.
Yeah, so it seems that part was pretty difficult.
Yeah.
That took years to get there. Yep. So, ladies and gentlemen, I recommend you to also not only see the website, but also see the stock. Maybe it's a good time, right? Think about it. Okay, so before we move on to the next question, maybe our audience has some questions, some burning questions that you want to ask. Yep, let's see. Have any questions? So someone who wants to be an entrepreneur, or someone, Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So while you are thinking about, the questions for Mir, actually, I have one burning question about medical device itself, because we had the first conversation maybe 7 years ago when I started my innovative medical device journey. And then I know that there are a lot of holes and a lot of difficulties and all of those things. So what do you see is the trend in innovative medical device, and where does the innovation lie?
Well, it's going, medical innovations are happening in so many different branches of technology. You hear constantly about robotic surgery. That is happening. The digital revolution is touching every aspect of medicine. People are trying to figure out how to leverage AI in diagnostics, in therapeutic algorithms, and so on. And in the medical technology devices in particular, areas such as the brain are very, very, there's so many neurologic disorders that are still poorly understood and poorly solved. Neuromodulation, stimulation of nerves to get a therapeutic effect, that has been going on, but it has picked up steam in the last 5 years, and there are numerous little companies that are stimulating different parts of the body to get a therapeutic effect. For instance, chronic pain can be treated with stimulating certain nerves, and the pain disappears. So people who are living on opiates and whatnot, that's one area. Epilepsy, vagal stimulation for epilepsy, or deep brain stimulation for Parkinson's disease, and they're even trying deep brain stimulation for stroke and rheumatoid arthritis and overactive bladder, and so every organ, there's some is innervated by the nerves that are controlled by the brain. So the either directly applying the stimulation therapy to the brain or to the peripheral nerves to get the therapeutic effect. So that's going to continue to expand. The other area is drug delivery, which I think, Rani Therapeutics is a good example. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the horizon, gene therapy, for instance, well, gene therapy needs to be delivered to specific organs or to where you want to get the therapeutic effect. That requires special drug delivery, or cell-based therapies. You need to deliver cells in certain areas. So the intersection of medicine, pharmaceuticals, and cell therapies and medical technology is all coming together. So if you lack the understanding of pharmaceuticals and whatnot, you're at a slight disadvantage. So I would encourage those of you who want to get into this business, educate yourself. There's tons of information on diseases. If you're working in the cancer space, learn about cancer. And one of the most exciting things on the horizon is what you must have heard is called CRISPR. This is gene editing. So you can actually go in and edit the DNA of a person and eliminate a disease completely. So people who have hemophilia, you can go in and replace the defective gene, and if that works, they're no longer suffering from hemophilia. It's cured. So that's the future of medicine, and so exciting.
Just now you mentioned about AI, artificial intelligence. Do you think that the application of AI in medical industry right now is a little bit premature, or you think?
I think it's, it's happening in small measures. I mean, AI is, in its simplest form is, certain algorithms. But if you look at robotic surgery, you have to embed
That's
AI.
very true.
You have to embed imaging and motion and various sensors.
Sure.
One of the 4 companies that Elon Musk owns is Neuralink. So it's actually in your area. It's related to biomedical.
Correct.
And they're trying to basically connect the brain directly to the part of the body that maybe in the midst of the transmitting the signal from the brain to the part of the body is either defective or something. Now, the ultimate goal, however, in terms of, since you are also interested in engineering, is actually the direct brain-to-machine interface.
Correct.
So what is your forecast in terms of when do you think this type of, well, maybe let me ask you the 2-part question. The first one is actually just communicating the brain to the part of the body, say a part of the leg that you have the part of the body that is disrupted, and then you try to pass the signal from the brain to the part that is defective. The second part, which is not related to the human body, but just a man-machine interface. The brain, instead of right now, for instance, right now we use voice, or we used to use text. Now currently it's voice. Eventually they say, well, brain signals directly to the machine, computer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean,
maybe you can pass on your view and perspective on these 2 areas.
There are two parts to your question. The first one is connecting the brain to a machine, a computer. So brain-computer interface. So a lot of people have worked on it, are working on it. Elon Musk's company was formed to do that. I have worked on it in the past. I recently spoke with a group in Geneva, and they're working on brain-to-computer interface. And it's basically, you have to put some sensors on the brain in specific, go ahead. 5 minutes? 3 minutes? 40 minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
So we still have 40 minutes.
Yeah. So I'm going to keep talking, don't worry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I'd love to have this conversation. So anybody else wants to
the more questions, the merrier.
into that. So that will happen. The issue is surgically implanting electrodes, and if you implant them in one location, there are activities going on everywhere. So how many electrodes can you put in? And so we have developed some technology that can listen to an entire hemisphere from one location. So this is going to happen, but the key is going to be safety, because people who will want to have it may not be sick. Healthy individuals who want to be able to control their environment with their thoughts. That's far into the future, but it'll happen. The short term is, let's say somebody who loses their arm and they get a prosthetic arm, a robotic arm. Now you want to go down and pick up a thing with a prosthetic arm. You could actually send signals to the arm, and as you think about it, it does it. And people have tried doing that, and that will definitely happen. And the only reason it hasn't happened yet is because prosthetics is a small market. So it requires huge amount of investment for a small number of patients. In fact, the guy who developed the Segway, Dean Kamen, I know him well, very brilliant guy. He also developed a robotic arm, but he had to shut down the company because, or I don't know where it is, but it couldn't commercialize it. It cost $300,000 to make. and the quantities were small. It wasn't easily scalable. But we're working on a very special problem. When somebody breaks their spinal cord, the connections to the bladder are gone. Not only can you not walk, but you cannot pee. So these people have to live with a catheter, which is a horrible quality of life. So what we've done in my lab, we've figured out how to control this sphincter that allows you to urinate and the bladder that you can relax or contract. And we can put a sensor on the bladder and sense when the bladder is full. Now, you lose all those sensations when the spinal cord is broken. So what we do is we have an active implant, electronic device, that once it senses that the bladder is full, can send a signal to the patient's cell phone. So instead of closing the loop through the nerves, we're closing through the eyes, through the cell phone. It sends a signal, an application pops up and tells them, your bladder is full, you gotta empty it. And the patient can get a urinal in place, press a button on their cell phone, and you start voiding. So there are ways we can do, the certain things we can do to control or close the loop. And there may be other areas where pain, for instance. We have done some work in, let's say if you're sitting up, you have no pain, but if you're trying to lie down or walk, you might get pain. So you can put sensors, posture sensing devices that then tell the implant to stimulate when you're in a certain posture. So there are these feedbacks, closed loop systems can become even more complex and incorporate AI in determining when to deliver what therapy.
Totally. Yeah. The one that Mir was talking about just now about, like the sensing, and you press one button and then you pee, right?
Yeah.
Like immediately, and then you press one more button and then it stops.
No, I mean, it
releases.
It allows you to pee for a couple of minutes, and then it stops on its own.
Yeah,
it doesn't wait for you to. What if you forget to press this button a second time?
Yeah, and then what happens, right? So it's not a story anymore. It's actually happening already.
So the Department of Defense gave us a $10 million grant because half the patients who break their spine are veterans. So the DoD has a special interest in that area. So those are just some of the examples.
Yep. Okay, any more questions from the audience? Okay, we will get one more from there and then from you. Do we have, okay, right there.
Good afternoon, Imran. I'm sorry, maybe because I'm not a good speaker. And my question is, consider the people use mask and vaccine. Which one you can recommend to use for? Because I think mask is more useful than vaccine because vaccine for me is not proof for the COVID-19. And the second question is, since you said Robert can do the operation, I mean, if Robert can do the operation, maybe he can do the simple blood analysis. And how do you think?
So,
and also, as a,
I don't follow.
I'm trying to find.
Okay, let's focus on the first question first. I think you mentioned something about vaccination, is that right? And the COVID-19. So what was the question again?
The AI is, because you mentioned that robot can do the surgery operation. So I think robot can do the blood analysis also. Since nowadays we see the health care expense so high, maybe do you have any opinion on how to lower the healthcare expense?
I'm hard of hearing, so I apologize. I can't.
Yeah, I think you're talking about something about medical expenses. Anyways, okay. So if we have more questions, and then yep. I think just now you had one question too, right?
Thank you.
You have a lot of questions. Okay, yeah.
Go right ahead.
We got one question over there.
Great talking. So my question is, under current situation, how do you recruit and retain best talent?
Can you do one more time so that the people at the end
Okay.
can hear?
Thank you for the great session. My question is, under current market situation, very competitive on the talents. So what's your advice for the entrepreneurs? How to recruit and retain best talents?
How to recruit and retain talent. That is a problem we all face. My experience is that, of course, you have to be competitive in compensation. You can't be not competitive. But then the next thing is, if you're doing something really exciting, and people come to you, they're attracted to the unique problems that we saw. I have never had a challenge attracting people.
Everyone is attracted to you, I guess.
No, I mean, but you still have to be highly competitive in the market, that your compensation, your benefits and whatnot have to be really great. But in addition to that, you have to be working on some really exciting projects, because everyone who works on these problems, they recognize, they immediately understand what a huge impact they can have on people's lives. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, we have a question from that gentleman.
Yeah, I'm sure glad you went to medical school, and I agree, I don't think I would have liked it, but it's good that you're doing neat things. My question is going back to AI. I think all of us have had the experience of having a doctor that was maybe not the best doctor. And do you see a future where, rather than go see a doctor, we would have a Q&A with an AI machine, which would be maybe more patient and more knowledgeable than maybe some of our doctors today?
Absolutely. I think that's where AI could potentially, regulations and insurance and all those things aside, I think we'll overcome those. And that's the only thing that's stopping us. Because clearly, misdiagnosis is a huge problem. You go to your GP and how many times they just misdiagnose, they give you the wrong drug, they prescribe the wrong drug. And hospitals have problems. So yes, AI would be the first place I would say apply that. And a number of people are projecting that there is a shortage of physicians. So if you have AI-based diagnosis and a highly trained nurse, that's all you might need. You don't need a family doctor. The family doctor could be replaced.
Okay, very good. We've got one question here from this lady. And we also got one over there, right? Yeah, that's the next one.
I noticed in the meeting materials Ms. Imran, having set up more than 20 companies and exited 15 companies, my question is, what set up so many?
Yeah.
And how can you balance your spare time and manage so many companies? What's the reason you set up so many companies? And I think it's something valued.
Can you
Yeah,
tell me?
I think this question might be better for Christine, actually. Okay, so I think the question is, how could you really balance so many companies and your life? That was actually my former question too.
Yeah, that's a great question, and you have to work hard at it. And I'm lucky that I have a wonderful wife and 5 children that allow me to do what I do. My wife Christine is sitting right there, and 4 of my 5 children work with me in one way or another. The 5th one is still in high school. So we're a very close-knit family. I spend a lot of time, as much time as I can. And getting them involved in my work gives me another opportunity to spend even more time with them. So that's the trick. Get your kids to work with you.
Yeah, I kind of feel that you are probably one of the most efficient person I've seen, because I think very, very few people in this world could really manage so many companies and 5 kids and 1 wife. So
yeah.
Right. So okay,
yeah.
We got one more question from that gentleman over there in blue.
My question is, as an entrepreneur, I want to see what is the point you will consider yourself as giving up on a research or on a business? Like, which is the point that you think that, okay, this is the point that I will stop investing my energy, time, or money onto a project or onto a progress?
Yeah, the question, I love the research part. I really enjoy problem solving. That's why I do what I do. But I realized at a very, very early young age in my teens that, yeah, I may be able to solve problems, but it does no one any good unless I am able to commercialize it. So the only way patients, in this country at least, the only way patients benefit from innovations is through commercialization. And so I had to become good at fundraising and building companies, putting teams together, getting FDA approval for the products that I was developing, and get them into clinical use, in some cases train the surgeons or physicians to adopt the new therapies. So it is a huge amount of effort for many, many years. And the other realization that happened was these things take such a long time to make something a standard of care. It can take 12 years or more. And I did some calculations back in the 40 years ago and realized that I would only be able to do maybe 3 or 4 of these, and my life would be over professionally. And so I decided there were so many problems I could see, so I decided I would do these things in parallel. So every year or every other year, I would launch a company. And I made a deal with the VCs, and I was really lucky. The venture capital investors really supported me and agreed to allow me to continue to create things in other areas and form other companies. Because normally they would never allow an entrepreneur to innovate and do something else while they're employed by their company. So it was a couple of VCs back in the late 80s, agreed to let me do that. And they said, there's one condition. And I said, what is that? And they said, you let us invest in every company that you create. So that was an easy deal to make. Okay. It's a huge effort. I realized that I have to do all that to get to that wonderful part of problem solving. Because if I don't do all these other things, nobody would invest in their money allowed me to do the work. So commercialization is essential. Otherwise, you can't help patients.
Okay. Well, thank you.
When do you stop investing in something? Yeah, that's right. Oh, it becomes obvious if you're not able to attract capital, and that can happen. For instance, in the peak of .com, I made the mistake. I didn't want to be left out, so I started a .com, a B2B, and that was a real mistake. But I started it about 3 months before the market crash of 2000. And so I'd raised a few $1 million. I'd put some of my money, started the company, built a team, market crashed. The next day I came in and I called all my investors and said, I'm shutting it down because this is such a deep crash, it's not likely to recover. So I shut down the company, returned whatever money was left. So sometimes macro conditions force you to make decisions. Your decisions are made by what is happening in the world. And sometimes, you go after a problem thinking you can solve it, but it doesn't reveal its secrets and you struggle for a while. And that has not happened to me because I do a lot of groundwork before I start a company, and I would rather kill it as a project rather than after forming a company and taking money. But there are other reasons. I gave one example of, I did a really silly thing of creating a product that was no need for. Another company I started, a biomaterials company, and I came up with a business model of licensing it to other medtech companies, my materials. Logical thing, but I didn't realize that medtech companies don't like paying royalties. So after about 2 years, I had to shut down the company, and I incorporated, I used the technologies in many of my companies, but that was a business model problem.
Can I summarize that? Is that like you find the cause of the failure, and then you are sure that this cause cannot be overcome, then you basically cut off.
Yeah, you have to know when to walk away and when to run. Mm-hmm. That old song.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you. Just now, you mentioned about the macro conditions. Mm-hmm. So just a follow-up question on that. So right now, we're also in a kind of macro condition, right? So do you have any recommendations or any observations about the big market right now?
Yeah, I mean, the market for financing is very bad, very tough, not because there's a lack of money, but the stock market conditions, the inflation, the threat of recession, everybody stops spending. The VCs say, well, maybe we should wait and see what happens, because what if if the recession lasts too long, we make an investment and then that company can't raise the next round of funding. So it really brings to a screeching halt fundraising. So that is, we're going through that. Okay. Now, in my case, I'm able to continue because I have the infrastructure, and I'm funding these projects myself, some of these little companies. And I'm also talking to investors, and and I keep the burn rate really low. I mean, I'm after 45 years of scar tissue, lash marks on my back from mistakes and from lack of money or whatever. I'm really sensitive to burn rate, so I do a lot of work. I build these companies with the minimum possible resources, and so it has made me into. I spend the money as if it's mine, and in many cases it is my money. But even when it was VC money, I would spend it very carefully. So.
Well, thank you. Do we have more questions? How are we doing on time?
Yeah.
20 minutes? Okay, great. Oh, the next one? Okay, great.
Hi, Mir. Thank you for sharing your valuable inputs. So actually, I'm a professor at San Jose State University, and I have a very similar background as you have. So I have a degree from mechanical engineering, EE, computer, I have a lot of certificate, and also I'm working on biomedical devices. What I found is really, really challenging is many people have brilliant ideas, but the problem is how you convey your idea to the successful product. For example, you talk about sensors. I actually have 3 books about sensors. The one challenging is, for example, you say we can put a sensor, in a blade and then sense how full the urine is. And when you implement it, it's a lot of challenges. For example, the blade, it's not a static, it's a dynamic. They keep moving. And also your body have a lot of liquid, different things around. And you have to think about the material is a biocompatible material, so a lot of things there. So my question to you is, if you can give us some example, how you can, successfully implement your idea to successful product. I think that will be very valuable to us because everybody have a great idea, just implementation part is just so challenging.
That's a great question. I'll repeat the question for others who may not have understood. How do you take your concept or what idea to and make it successful? That's the gist of it. And I work on probably 20, 30 things simultaneously. By that, I mean I'm thinking of 20, 30 or more problems. And because I'm always hunting for what problem to solve. I don't want to waste my resources or my investors' resources on problems that I may not be able to solve. I mean, I have my own limitations of knowledge, and not every problem will reveal its secrets to me. So I may recognize a problem, but I may not know how to solve it, may not have the right background or whatever. So I work on a whole bunch of things. And every year, 1 or 2 of them graduate to become where I have a clear line of sight to a solution. And then I can build around that all the other things like what is the regulatory path, how do you manufacture the product, how do you conduct clinical trials. All those things happen after, but you need to start with the right problem, and you have to be willing to walk away. And if you're a professor, you can probably apply to a lot of grants, and you can fund your crazy ideas through grants, and then only the ones that really look good you spin off into a company. Because none of us, I mean, we may work on a lot of things. Not every problem you work on, you'll be able to solve. And not every solution has commercial potential.
So Mir, well, that being said, are you more tactical or you're more, I should say, strategic? Meaning that you are trying to actually think of all the risks that might be there before you get started? Or you think, okay, this might be the right question that I wanted to, or the problem that I wanted to solve. And then you take one step further, and then you get started, and then you take another step. Or are you actually trying to think of all the problems?
No, I mean, in the back of your mind, you're automatically, once you do it a few times, you're wired to think about regulatory, clinical, and money. Financing risk is the single biggest risk these companies face. But
very true.
I'm talking about long before I start a company, I'm looking for all the reasons why I shouldn't start the company, why I don't fall in love with my ideas, because I've seen that if you do that, you're stuck with it, and you're spending other people's money, and you're stuck with that until you close the business, and it sucks so much time. A bad idea can take up a lot of your energy, but so I'm always looking for good problems to solve, and let the problem tell me how it wants to be solved. I don't, I don't start with say, I have an idea that I should use this nanotechnology. That's ridiculous, right? Who cares about nanotechnology? I care about problems, and if that problem needs AI or nanotechnology or something else, an implantable device, I'll do that, but let the problem tell you how it wants to be solved. Otherwise, you're forcing a technology on a problem and that solution may not be the right solution.
Very good. I've got one from that gentleman.
Thank you, Mr. Imran. My question is, many of my young students and young friends in engineering complain, especially my colleague here, a Chinese engineer, complain about the bamboo ceiling. I don't know if that's discussed, but I'd love to see your view. Is it real? If it's real, how can we as a group to support young engineer to break that bamboo ceiling to become director, board member, CEO? I wanted to see your view. Thank you.
So I'm going to rephrase the question. So a lot of young engineers are something about CEO. I missed that part.
Basically, I think the question is, I think you are talking about the engineers of the Chinese or the Asian descent. Mm-hmm. These people, it's easier for these people to actually face the glass ceiling in companies. So how are we going to break that?
Oh, that's easy. I'm no different. Even though I'm not Chinese, I look slightly Chinese, but even though I'm not Chinese, but we all face some level of glass ceiling and whatnot. And I was lucky that I never looked for a job. So I didn't have the glass ceiling. I kept, I started off as CEO of the company, and I was inexperienced and all that. I wish I had an MBA, but did it without it. But yeah, there is, especially in areas like California, that glass ceiling is going away. I mean, look at the CEOs of the top companies, the Alphabet CEO, the Microsoft CEO, they're all Indians. There's many Chinese origin CEOs, Vietnamese. I think that glass ceiling is shattering away. And more importantly, there are women CEOs. In fact, that number is growing dramatically. So I think there's still hope for us.
I think that's exactly why we're having this dinner banquet tonight. Yeah, because we are actually awarding those people, right? And we as a group are supporting this. So it's just a matter of time, and it's already happening. So come to our dinner banquet tonight.
So in my company, more than 50% of my employees are women, more than 50%, slightly more than 50%. And more than half of my senior management team, at least in some of the companies, are women. So I'm completely blind to everything. And when you do that, I think that diversity really builds a lot of strength. There is a lot of innovation happens in diversity, diverse group of people to bring that such diverse points of view. And so I have a huge number of Asians in my team, Chinese, Vietnamese, South Asians. So there's no glass ceiling. I mean, we know we can break it. So I think women face the biggest challenge, as I have seen up close.
Yeah, well, I thank you for saying that.
Pardon me?
Being a woman myself.
Not you. But I mean, you're an exception. You're a great role model. But I'm a guy. I hang out with guys, and I know how guys are thinking. And but that is slowly going away. I have 4 daughters. I want them to be
Right.
successful.
Okay, great. Okay. That might be the last question that we can take. I think we're running out of time.
Hi. Great talk. Thanks. I've learned quite some good tips from you. Thanks for your sharing today. I'm asking probably 2 questions, if I may. One is for those young, people who just graduated or in the early stage of their career. They want to start up, they want to become an entrepreneur in the technology perspective. And looking back what you have done since the beginning of your career to now, at the beginning you mentioned you had some failures of your startup companies, but you kept moving on and eventually you got some, right? And you get more experience. So looking back at all this experience you've learned, could you offer some advices to this young entrepreneur or those who would like to start the entrepreneurship at the early career stage? And what kind of things, most important things that you think they should consider or try it out before they start on something as a startup? And what kind of business partners that would be crucial for them? Because I think just one person will be probably not easy to really get something to commercialize.
Right.
Yeah. So
lots of questions.
Sorry.
So let me start with the first question, which is a young entrepreneur. How should they get started? Is that
Yes,
fair
exactly.
question?
Yes, that's a fair question.
So I think this is a problem I faced when I was a young entrepreneur, and I realized that I should go after the most important problems. If you solve a problem that has a profound impact on lots of people, investors will invest in that. If you can demonstrate that you have the skills to solve that problem, if you have come up with a solution. So initially, don't focus on the one narrow area that you got training in, and if I'm a software engineer, I can write an app. Well, what percentage of apps are actually successful? Probably a fraction of a percent. So focus instead on the problem you're solving. And if it is a problem worth solving, if it's an important problem, then you'll attract a lot of attention. And hopefully you have the requisite background to solve it. And if you don't, gather those people, bring those and make them co-founders of your company, and build a team even before you form a company, and share the equity or whatever. But you can, if you come up with a solution to a big problem, everything else falls in place. And if you're doing a Me Too product, where I'm making something slightly better, that is, I think that's the worst thing a small startup can do, because then you're stepping into a crowded intellectual property field. A lot of other companies that have products already on the market have IP. You're going to step on that. And you're also going to face competition. If you get past the IP issue, other large companies will look at what you're doing and do it faster and better, maybe. So one of the advantages of going after problems that no one has solved is you don't have to worry about competition. I hate competition. I don't want competition when I'm building a company. And the best way to ensure that is to go after problems that no one has solved.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we have time for one last question. The one at the back.
2 last questions.
So what is that question? What is that problem you see right now that you would love to solve, and maybe we can we can learn from you?
This moment, I'm thinking about many problems, including brain cancer, diabetes, and a whole bunch of other things. Women's health, I've got some really good ideas. I'm afraid to start a women's health company because OBGYNs don't adopt technology that easily. So So I have some really amazing solutions for things like menstrual migraines or gastroparesis.
Why are they so more conservative than the other surgeons or doctors?
They're the most conservative.
Most conservative.
Yeah.
Okay.
They also deal with the highest risk, delivering babies or obstetrics and so on.
I see.
So whatever the reason, there are a number of problems to be solved there.
Yeah. So make sure don't touch that part. Okay. I think our time is up, right? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Mir, for this wonderful conversation and your thoughts and everything. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We would like to present a recognition plaque. Christie will present it to you.
Oh. This is presents the certificate of appreciation.
Thank you.
Mir Imran.
Thank you so much.